Welcome to the Geostrategic Podcast, your ongoing source for clear, structured updates on global geostrategic challenges. We explore the forces shaping global power, crisis hotspots, and how governments react, so you stay informed with less effort.
Welcome, curious minds, to another deep dive. Today we're plunging into a really fascinating and, frankly, a bit of a tense situation unfolding on the global stage. Imagine satellite eyes, commercial ones, peering down on this remote Arctic island, spotting signs of a powerful nation preparing for a test that could, well, send ripples through international diplomacy. We've got a really compelling stack of sources here, everything from cutting-edge satellite imagery analysis, the kind of stuff, that used to be just for spy agencies, to insights from seasoned security experts and even official maritime and aviation warnings. Our mission, as always, is to take these different pieces, connect the dots for you, and maybe reveal some hidden layers of what's really going on.
What's truly fascinating here, I think beyond just the headlines, is how you can take multiple seemingly unrelated bits of data. I mean, things like the movement of a single shipping container, maybe a protective shelter sliding back and forth, flight restrictions over a huge area of sea, how all that, when you put it together, can paint such an incredibly clear picture of significant activity, sensitive activity. We'll be exploring not just the what, but also the implications, especially with these high-stakes political talks happening almost at the same time.
You've hit on something vital there. It's that convergence, isn't it? Putting the pieces together. So let's unpack this. We're talking about Russia, a very remote Arctic test site, this potentially groundbreaking, but also frankly worrying missile, and a major summit on the horizon. What this deep dive should reveal is not just what's happening, but maybe how the world is watching now, how transparent things can be, and why that changes the game. So let's dive in. Okay, first up, our primary source. It's a detailed report from August 13, 2025. It lays out the evidence suggesting Russia appears to be, moving full steam ahead with preparations to test its new nuclear-armed, nuclear-powered cruise missile. This isn't just rumor, right? This is based on observation.
Exactly. Concrete observation. And what's really crucial, maybe the most crucial part, is the timing. It's incredibly precise. These preparations are peaking just as Russian President Vladimir Putin is gearing up for these critical talks on Ukraine with U.S. President Donald Trump, scheduled for Friday, August 15th. So it immediately raises the question, what message, if any, is Russia trying to send here? Is it pure military signaling, something more subtle?
That is the big question. Now, the report, it cites two leading U.S. researchers, Jeffrey Lewis from the Middlebury Institute and Decker Eveleth from CNA, both very well respected in open source intelligence circles, and they reached their conclusions independently, which is important. They did it by meticulously studying imagery from Planet Labs, that's a commercial satellite firm imagery taken right up until Tuesday, August 12th.
Right. And their analysis, which was later corroborated by a Western security source, points to really extensive activity, undeniable activity, I'd say. It's at the Pankovo test site on the Novaya Zemlya archipelago up in the Barents Sea. Super remote. We're seeing significant increases in personnel, lots of specialized equipment coming in, and the telltale presence of ships and aircraft, the kind that have been directly associated with previous tests of this exact missile type. It's not subtle activity. It looks like a full-scale operation ramping up.
Lewis himself is quoted in the report saying, "We can see all of the activity at the test site, which is both huge amounts of supplies coming in to support operations and movement at the place where they actually launched the missile." It really sounds like they're pushing forward, leaving very little doubt. So if they're moving full steam ahead, as Lewis put it, how can these researchers be so confident? I mean, in an age where maybe secrets are harder to keep, what exactly is this mosaic of observable facts? What are they actually seeing from space?
That's a great question. It really shows the power of this modern open source approach. Lewis and Eveleth weren't just glancing at pictures. They examined Planet Labs imagery day after day, starting back in July, basically building a timeline. And they observed very concrete things. You could literally see stacks of shipping containers piling up. That points to a big logistical effort. A large crane for moving them around, a helicopter, probably for support or personnel transport in that remote area. But here's the really clinching detail, I think. The protective shelter for the missile launcher itself, the Burevestnik launcher. It was seen repeatedly being slid back and forth. Eveleth called that very clear evidence of test plans. It's like seeing someone prepping a car in a garage, opening and closing the door, getting ready. It signals deliberate preparation.
Wow. Okay, so it's not just static images, it's the pattern of activity over time, almost like time lapse from space. And it wasn't only things happening on the ground, was it? There was air support too.
Right. Precisely. They spotted 2 large jets parked at the Rogachevo military airfield nearby starting mid-July, and these jets had distinctive saucer-shaped radar domes on top. Now, those aren't just transport planes. They're specifically equipped to gather test data. They're flying listening posts, basically, designed to track the missile, capture telemetry, trajectory data, everything. Their presence is a very strong indicator that a test requiring detailed data collection is planned.
Okay, land and air covered. What about at sea? Any activity there?
Yes, definitely. At least 5 ships that have been linked to previous Burevestnik tests were confirmed to be in the vicinity. And a 6th ship, a cargo vessel called the Burka, also known from earlier test support.
How well?
It was tracked using vesselfinder.com. That's a public ship tracking website. -UO tracked, heading straight for Novaya Zemlya, expected to arrive around Tuesday, August 12th. So this level of coordinated support land, air, and sea assets all converging, it strongly suggests a major event is imminent, all the pieces moving into place.
It paints a pretty comprehensive picture just from the imagery and tracking data. But were there other signals, like official warnings or public notifications, anything to add to this mosaic?
Absolutely, and this really layers on the confirmation. Russia itself put out a notice to mariners, a NOTAM for the sea, essentially back on August 6th. It advised ships to steer clear of a specific patch of the Barents Sea between August 9th and 12th. Standard procedure before a test, but still significant. And then the US FAA's Defense Internet NOTAM service, that's the warning system for pilots, it showed Russian notices indicating a possible launch window, a window stretching from August 9th all the way to August 22nd.
So clearing the seas and the skies, that seems like a very unambiguous signal, doesn't it?
It really does. And just to add another layer, the Norwegian military also chimed in. They confirmed the Barents Sea is a, quote, prime location for Russian missile tests, end quote, and said they too had indications from these notices and warnings, indications of preparations for test activities. So you have commercial satellites, public ship tracking, official Russian warnings, U.S. aviation alerts, and confirmation from a neighboring military. It builds a really compelling, almost irrefutable case that something is about to happen. Makes you think about secrecy in this day and age.
It really does. It's like watching a detective story unfold in near real time. Every little piece carefully gathered, pointing in the same direction. And what's striking is how much of this is, publicly accessible now, not just government secrets. Okay, let's shift focus slightly to the missile itself. This 9M730 Burevestnik, or Storm Petrel. NATO calls it the SSC X-9 Skyfall. What's the deal with this particular weapon? Why is it so significant, or maybe so controversial?
Well, it got a lot of attention because President Putin himself has made some extremely bold claims about it. Really bold. He's called it invincible to missile defenses, both current ones and any future ones. He's claimed it has practically unlimited range because of its nuclear power source and an unpredictable flight path, making it hard to track or intercept. Its development seemed to gain, let's say, extra urgency for Moscow after President Trump announced that U.S. Golden Dome missile defense shield concept back in January. Even though Golden Dome was more vision than reality, it signaled a strong U.S. focus on missile defense, which Moscow clearly saw as a challenge to its own deterrent.
Right, so very grand claims. Invincible, unlimited range. But the actual track record, according to the reports we're looking at, tells a, somewhat different story.
Yeah, it certainly does. The Nuclear Threat Initiative, an advocacy group that tracks these things pretty closely, says the Burevestnik has had a, let's say, less than stellar test history. They count maybe 2 partial successes out of 13 known tests.
Wow.
Well, that's not a great success rate. It definitely doesn't scream invincible or operationally ready, does it? It raises serious questions about how real those claimed capabilities are today.
And beyond just the poor test record, what are independent experts saying? Are they buying the hype?
Generally, no. Many experts are quite skeptical. They question if it can really evade sophisticated defenses, or if it even gives Moscow capabilities it doesn't already have with its existing, more reliable strategic missiles. There seems to be a big gap between the political rhetoric surrounding this missile and its actual demonstrated performance. And then there's another huge concern, completely separate from the military aspect, the environment. Because it's nuclear-powered, it's essentially flying a small nuclear reactor. During flight, whether testing or, heaven forbid, deployment, it's expected to spew radiation along its path. That highlights a massive practical problem alongside the strategic questions. It's not just a weapon, it's a potential environmental nightmare.
Okay, so putting it all together, the intense activity, this controversial missile type, and especially this timing right before the summit, it just screams political message, doesn't it? What do you think the strategic thinking is here? Is this purely about intimidating ahead of the talks?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? And it gets to the heart of how nations interact. Now, the researchers, the experts we've cited, they generally agree that planning for a test like this takes a long time, much longer than the few days since the Trump-Putin meeting was announced last week. However, there's always a political dimension to these major military actions. Always. They aren't just technical exercises, they send signals.
So even if the test was broadly planned for this period, the specific timing, maybe not postponing it, that could be the signal.
Precisely. Tom Countryman, who used to be a top arms control official at the State Department, made exactly this point. He said, sometimes you can push up or push down the schedule for a political reason. Think about it. Putin could have chosen to pause these preparations. Easily. That would have been a signal, right? A signal of wanting maybe a better atmosphere for the talks, perhaps hinting at openness on Ukraine, or restarting arms control negotiations. Especially with the New START treaty, the last big nuclear treaty between the U.S. and Russia, expiring really soon, February 5th. Time is running out on that.
So by not pausing, by letting these very visible preparations continue right up to the eve of the summit, it's making a different kind of statement. It's like a move on the diplomatic chessboard. How does that work? How does a test, or even just the visible preparation for one, function as leverage?
It's classic power politics, really. You use demonstrations of military capability, or even just the potential for capability, to influence the diplomatic conversation. So this potential test isn't just about whether the Burevestnik actually works perfectly. It's about projecting an image of strength, maybe resolve, maybe even a bit of unpredictability ahead of the summit. It could be an attempt to set the tone, to remind the other side of Russia's military power, or perhaps to create leverage. Look what we're capable of. Now let's talk. It forces us to really consider that intricate dance between military moves and diplomatic talks. Sometimes the loudest messages aren't spoken, they're demonstrated. Even just setting up the demonstration can be the message.
As we pull back from this deep dive, it's really clear how all these threads, the satellite intel, the expert analysis, the high-stakes diplomacy weave together. It paints a pretty compelling and maybe slightly unnerving picture. We've seen how these seemingly small details, a shelter moving, ships converging, a warning notice, how they collectively point to potentially huge geopolitical developments.
Exactly. And what we've really uncovered here isn't just about one potential missile test. It's more like a window into how nations calculate their moves in the 21st century. It's about how military demonstrations, flexing muscles, become part of the negotiation toolkit, and how perceptions of capability, even if the capability isn't fully proven, still play a massive role in international relations and that whole delicate balance of power.
It certainly gives you a lot to chew on, doesn't it? This whole situation is just a stark reminder of how fragile that global balance can be, and that constant tension between needing deterrence and needing dialogue. It shows how actions, even way up in the remote Arctic, can echo loudly in the halls of power.
Indeed. So as you think about all this, maybe consider this question. We live in an age of increasing transparency, right? Commercial satellites, open source intelligence everywhere. So how does a nation truly project power or send unambiguous signals when it knows, or should assume, that its every significant military move might be watched, analyzed, and maybe even publicized by anyone from researchers to journalists to other governments? Does the simple fact of being watched fundamentally change the game? Does it alter how nations posture and signal in this more transparent world?
That is a powerful question to ponder, and one we'll likely see play out again and again. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Until next time, keep asking questions and keep digging for understanding. If you found this discussion valuable, please like, share, and subscribe to the Geostrategic Podcast for more in-depth analysis on topics that shape our world. Stay informed, stay ahead, and stay tuned for the next episode.